Welcome, everyone, to the ICSS Sunday Morning Marxist Forum. My name is Alan Miller, and I'm a member of the program committee for ICSS Sunday morning sessions. We are based in Oakland, California, in the San Francisco Bay Area, USA. Our weekly programs are online via Zoom every Sunday morning at 10:30 a.m. Pacific Time, and you can sign up at our website, icssmarks.org, to receive weekly email announcements for our Sunday sessions. We started doing these programs in Oakland in 2006, and you can view videos of past presentations, send us messages using our contact form, and make a donation to support our programs on our website, which is icssmarks.org. We're pleased today to have as our speaker California, Humboldt County-based writer and activist Rainer Shea. Rainer is an astute observer, an original thinker, and an insightful Marxist analyst. You can find his writings at his Substack, substack.com @Rainer Shea. It's highly recommended that you check him out. Rainer will be discussing today how the worker struggle for socialism has changed since the last century. In this session, he'll go over the role of BRICS in the class struggle, the US-led bloc as the sole manifestation of imperialism, and how to escape the patterns of stagnation that have long plagued much of the communist movement. So with that, I want to welcome Rainer to Sunday Morning Marxist Forum, and thank you. Take it from here.
So the goal I have in emphasizing these ideas at this moment in history is to encourage a series of emergency discussions and mobilizations among members of the international communist movement and among the broader anti-imperialist element. Because right now, the United States is mobilizing towards an invasion of Venezuela. I mean, quite possibly, unless there's some fake out tactics going on, and all that the Trump administration will do is just carry out some show strikes to try to look strong. It's quite possible that there will be an Iraq type scenario within Venezuela in the very near future, and the communist movement needs to take the right side in this situation. And there is a very large chunk of the global workers movement, a very large amount of professed communist parties that have failed to take the right stance on Venezuela. And what do I mean? Because it's not like these parties are outright saying we support an invasion of Venezuela. What they've been doing is vilifying the Bolivarian Revolution, attacking the Maduro government as supposedly being a betrayer of the working class. And it's this problem, this sin that has been committed by all of these communist parties that is a practical type of issue when it comes to this whole debate over what the definition of imperialism is and how we should view the current new Cold War. So the thing that started me on this ideological struggle is the fact that the KKE, the Communist Party of Greece, had promoted the smears against Maduro that were put forth by the Trotskyist wreckers within the Venezuelan Communist Party, and that were supported by the Trotskyist international Marxist tendency. So, for some more background, after the death of Hugo Chavez, the Trotskyist faction within the Communist Party of Venezuela was able to gain a lot more influence. And they used their platform to promote highly distorted narratives about what was going on in Venezuela, about where the government stood. They blamed Maduro for the economic crisis within Venezuela, and they deliberately omitted the role of the U.S. sanctions. That was a big part of their arguments. And these arguments were backed up, or that they were propagated by the ostensibly Marxist-Leninist KKE, and also by the other communist parties that the KKE is affiliated with, because the KKE has a lot of influence over other communist parties around the world. Obviously, not all of them, but quite a lot of them. And it's due to this outsized influence the KKE holds that the communist movement has largely been failing on a macro scale to address the US aggressions against Venezuela. Because when the KKE has spoken about the US aggressions against Venezuela, it's made sure to add that it does not support Maduro, that it views Maduro's government as a villain for the workers. And so, as a result of these dishonest tactics, a grievously harmful split occurred within the Venezuelan workers' movement. The Communist Party of Venezuela was devastated because a lot of people, of course, became unable to trust them after these dishonest actions that the leadership carried out, and it was greatly diminished. The good news is that in these last couple of years, the KKE is the Greek Communist Party, to address a chat question. So the consequence of these dishonest tactics was that the workers' movement within Venezuela was fractured and weakened in certain respects. And it's only in these last couple of years that the authentic militants within the Communist Party of Venezuela have managed to retake control over their party after the Trotskyist faction had anti-democratically essentially carried out a coup and excluded the people who still supported Maduro. It's only in these last couple of years that the Communist Party of Venezuela has been able to regain the correct position on the Bolivarian Revolution and start to rebuild itself. So I want to first focus on that because it shows the practical aspect of this whole discussion. This is not just a theoretical debate. This has very consequential implications for where the global communist movement is going to go, and how unified it can be, and how strong it can be in the face of the aggressions that the imperial hegemon is carrying out right now. So, surrounding this smear campaign against Venezuela has been a smear campaign against Russia and China, by extension Iran, really against every anti-imperialist government that exists in the world today. And the smear campaign has been supported from a Marxist angle by the KKE's faction within the international workers movement. So I've been studying the kinds of arguments that the KKE makes in order to support this notion about Russia and China being imperialist and the new Cold War being an inter-imperialist conflict. And what these arguments essentially rely upon is a distortion of what capitalism means, of what imperialism means, and the omission of the role that finance plays. The KKE has argued that because Russia is has been in the past one of the top exporters of capital within the top 10 list, supposedly that's proof that Russia is imperialist. But what they're really talking about is capital flight, and that the Russian capitalist class has been carrying out within countries like Cyprus. That's the biggest recipient of capital flight from the Russian capitalist class. And there is a fundamental difference between capitalist flight and the kind of monopoly financial capitalism that actually constitutes imperialism as it exists in the present era. In order for a country to have an imperialist role, it needs to be an exporter of financial capital, which is to say, it needs to be a country that exploits other countries on the to the degree where a financial monopoly is able to be cultivated. And it's really only the United States that any longer has an imperialist role. That is a true imperialist country, even though the other historic colonial powers uh, are also beneficiaries of imperialism. It's only the United States that is a true imperialist country today, because it's in the United States where monopoly financed capital has found its new center in the post-war world. And this is where we get to the arguments of Greg Godels, who is somebody who he ideologically supports the KKE. He aligns with the KKE's positions. He's an author at Marxism, Leninism Today. And something I find interesting about the arguments he's made in order to support the inter-imperialist warfare position is he's admitted that in the modern world, finance is concentrated around the United States, that the imperialist superstructure is centrally located within the United States. And I think the reason why he concedes so much within this debate is because he's somebody who he understands Marxist theory to the extent where he can't really say a country doing a certain action, carrying out a certain policy, makes it imperialist. There's a lot of anarchists and right-wingers and liberals, in order to say that Russia and China are imperialist, they point to policies that these countries have carried out that supposedly prove their imperialism. But in order to prove a country as being imperialist, well, coming from a real Marxist-Leninist position, you need to show that that country is part of the imperialist system, that it fulfills the economic prerequisites for imperialism. Because one of the biggest lessons that you learn from reading Lenin's Imperialism is that imperialism is not a policy, it is a system. So I just think that's interesting that Greg Godels needs to argue on those terms and thereby concede effectively that the United States is the sole remaining imperialist power in the world today. So in order to try to make this argument about imperialism somehow not being synonymous with US hegemony, even though that just by admitting US is the financial center, you've already kind of already conceded that debate, Godels argues that imperialism is somehow not synonymous with finance, so that there can be a type of imperialism in the world today which is not financial. And in order to do this, he's making this argument in this article. He's responding to the arguments of Carlos Garrido, who pointed out this reality about imperialism only takes on a financial role, and the U.S. is the financial center. So Godels responds to that by saying, well, finance is largely an ephemeral scam that's carried out by the capitalist class, by the Wall Street traders. And because this capital is so fictitious in so many ways, supposedly that means that there can be a type of imperialism which is not tied in with finance. But that argument doesn't work, because in order for a country to be imperialist, again, it needs to have that financial center. And so the finance largely being fictitious does not change this. And so it's these types of fallacious arguments when it comes to the nature of capitalism as it exists today, when it comes to how capital interacts and what it means for a country to be imperialist, that have set up the foundations for the types of arguments made by the international Marxist tendency, by the KKE, by the Venezuelan Trotskyists, that have had such a damaging effect. So we've already seen the kinds of repercussions which these kinds of logical fallacies can have, the kinds of damage that they can do to the workers' movement. And in order to avoid those kinds of repercussions in the future, we need to struggle against these types of fallacious mindsets, these types of flawed theories that lead people down a bad path. And in order to do that, we need to figure out the root of this ideological problem. Right? But what is the reason behind why the KKE has taken these positions? Because the KKE used to be a revolutionary organization. It used to have a great revolutionary role. It was the party that led Greece's resistance against the Nazis, and British imperialism worked to crush the KKE in order to prevent Greece's socialist revolution. So how did the KKE go from that to this? Like is always the case for a communist party that used to be revolutionary but has deteriorated over time, a core part of the explanation is a lack of rigor within the ideological education of the ranks of that party. That's the reason why the Communist Party USA declined into a reformist and opportunist entity. It's the reason behind why the Soviet Union's ruling party became something that was unable to defend the revolution. It's because the rank and file was not sufficiently educated. And what does it mean to maintain that kind of rigorous education? Essentially, what it means is continuously training the ranks of your organization to be creative in one's political practice, to continuously investigate the conditions as they exist in the moment, and use that to find a political practice that actually works. And so if you neglect that kind of education, if you let those creative skills atrophy, what happens is you come to the kinds of conclusions the KKE has, where they're mechanistically applying the view of imperialism and imperialist warfare that was applicable in Lenin's time. They're applying that to the conditions of today. And they're saying that because World War I was an inter-imperialist war, and Lenin wrote about this inter-imperialist war, therefore that means that according to Lenin, the confrontations between the United States and its geopolitical rivals are a new inter-imperialist war. The argument really is that silly. And when you understand the dynamics of finance as it relates to capitalism and imperialism, you see why that argument is so silly. So why could such an absurd type of logic gain such a foothold within the KKE and by extension a lot of the other communist parties throughout the world? I really think it's because amid the downfall of the Soviet Union, a large part of the international communist movement became frozen in time. And because it was frozen in time, because it kept looking to the past, it found itself unable to deal with the problems of the post-Soviet era in the way that are actually coherent, and that involve a real investigation of the present conditions. I mean, the ruling communist parties, the communist parties in China, Cuba, DPRK, Laos, Vietnam, they've succeeded because that's the only way they've been able to survive. They've needed to learn from the Soviet Union's mistakes and continue to rigorously investigate the conditions as they exist today. But quite a lot of the communist parties that lack state power, like the KKE, it's evident that they have failed in this task, and they have fallen far behind. So even though they uphold the Soviet Union, they uphold it in a way that is quite flawed, in a way that misinterprets what actually made the Soviet Union come into being, because again, they failed to rigorously investigate the conditions and maintain creativity in their analysis. So how does this relate to BRICS? Because BRICS is another thing that another part of this debate with Gödels and the KKE, where Gödels has pointed out, and I think he's actually correct on this point, that BRICS is not going to fight the class struggle for us. And this is a point that I've made, and this is something that we actually need to deal with as Marxist-Leninists, this problem of people feeling as if BRICS is going to do quite a lot of the work for us. And so we don't necessarily need to do that work ourselves. And I think that the position communists need to come to on BRICS, how we need to view the role of BRICS within the class struggle, is firstly recognize that BRICS was only ever going to have a limited role within the class struggle. It was only ever going to be an international formation that made the global South more capable of economically lifting itself up and reversing the centuries-long trends of colonial exploitation. And that's the constructive role that BRICS has played. And it's a very important role. That's why I support BRICS, despite my critiques of the types of people who idealize it. So the next step beyond BRICS would be a new formation of worker states, a new formation of workers' alliances that are capable of bringing a class struggle forward and responding to the imperial hegemon's aggressions in a way that lead to a new series of proletarian victories. And this moment is a great opportunity for that kind of project. I really believe that if the workers' movement manages to respond to what Washington is doing in a way that is coherent, in a way that actually understands the conditions as they exist today, in a way that is supportive of the Bolivarian Revolution and Maduro, then we're going to be able to make a kind of progress that is really unprecedented in history, because this is a new time, and no kind of struggle like this the struggle has never been in this kind of state before. So what we do next is going to need to be unprecedented by necessity. So those are my initial thoughts. Does anybody have any queries?
We'll do the Q&A after. Okay, we want to try to do your presentation, and then we'll have interactive Q&A.
Yes.
So just let us know when you're done.
Oh, actually, I have another big point, which is the way that the KKE views Palestine. And this relates to everything else I'm saying. This relates to a point that was brought up earlier. I don't know if it was recorded. A point that was brought up earlier about how these kinds of dogmatic Marxists who think that Maduro is the enemy and view the present war as an inter-imperialist war, they're the types of Marxists who think that the only thing we need to ever account for is the contradiction between the workers and the capitalists. And of course, that's central to Marxism. But to reduce everything to that is very harmful, because that fallacy is called economism, where Marxists reduce everything to a narrow range of economistic struggles, and thereby limit their practice to effectively limit their practice to reformism, only thinking about the kinds of victories that somebody could win while narrowly working within capitalism. So economism is essentially a retreat into a very limited scope of struggle. that renders the movement stagnant and complacent. And as a consequence of this proliferation of crude economism within the movement, parties like the KKE have taken a stance on Palestine that is really quite abhorrent, and I'm going to explain why. It's abhorrent because the KKE has claimed that we should view both the Palestinians and the Israeli people as victims of the right-wing Netanyahu government. And I I remember the KKE's statement about this. They said some responded to this with revulsion by claiming that we were failing to account for something, but they're the ones who have failed to account for how the Israeli working class is too a victim of Netanyahu's right-wing capitalist policies. And I mean, if you know anything about the situation in Palestine and just how stark the inequalities are between Israeli Jewish colonizers and the indigenous Palestinians, then yeah, you could immediately see why this argument is problematic, to say the least. What this comes from is like I said, a narrow, dogmatic view of what the struggle should be focused on, what it really constitutes, and it's because of this crude economism that the KKE has taken a stance on Palestine, which really it fails to account for how so-called Israel is a Nazi state and how there is no proletariat within Palestine beyond the slave laborers who have been put into that position by the settler colonial project. Like there is no there can be no real proletariat, no working class by the strict definition of the term within that colonizer element. So when they say working class, then they're really misinterpreting what working class means. So that's another aspect of this ideological failure. And unless we account for how the class struggle has changed, unless we account for the kinds of conditions we're facing today, then these kinds of failures are going to keep coming up, and the consequence of that is going to be the more the United States advances its position, the more the United States advances its aggressions. We're going to keep seeing these communist parties take weak stances, and we're going to keep seeing them use these moments of crisis as opportunities for advancing some sectarian conflict, like the KKE has been doing amid these moments of U.S. aggression against Venezuela. When this cannot be the future of the communist movement. The communist movement needs to recognize the ways that the class struggle has changed, and it needs to take the correct stance. And that's my thesis.
All right, thank you, Rainer. So after a few short announcements, we're going to have questions and comments from participants. To ask a question or make a comment, please raise your hand by clicking on the reactions raise hand button at the bottom of your Zoom window. We ask everybody to keep your questions short, one question at a time, to allow everyone to participate. And keep in mind that this is a comradely forum for political discussion. Please show respect to other participants, the speaker, and the moderator of today's session. We have some upcoming programs we'd like to tell you about. Next Sunday, November 2nd at 10:30 a.m. Pacific time, we're going to have a review and group discussion of Domenico Lacerdo's Class Struggle, a Political and Philosophical History, led by Program Committee member Raj Sahai. This should be a great follow-up on today's session, kind of the big picture about what is going on in in the world communist movement, and how do we assess what's going on in the world today in relation to imperialism. On Sunday, November 9th, we're going to have a session, Haiti Today Through an Anti-Imperialist Lens. The speaker is going to be Pierre Lebossier, co-founder of the Haiti Action Committee, who will provide an update on the current situation in Haiti. I want to remind everybody to go to our website and sign up for future notifications of programs, icssmarks.org. You can also send us a message on our contact form and view videos of past programs. So, with that, what I'd like to do is have everybody, people who are interested in asking questions, raise your hand. And I'm going to just kick it off by uh, I'll start off by asking, well, okay, I'll ask, Raj has his hand up. So go ahead, Raj. Why don't you unmute?
Rainer, it was great. I substantially agree with you. I mean, I don't want to say I agree with everything, but because I have to think through, but I substantially agree with you. And the my reading of the Russian Revolution, which I'd done fairly carefully, is that the reason it was successful because the Bolsheviks were able to have three elements combined. First is the working class against the weak capitalist class, which was supported by Britain and France, external powers which controlled the government quite a bit, substantially controlled the Russian government. So that was, and it was a proletarian party. It was not a party of all workers. It was a proletarian party of workers who had to go to work every day to eat. And therefore, it really was a party where the workers had nothing to lose, as Marx said, except their chains. So they're willing to struggle. So that's first element, and they were leading the struggle. But importantly, who were their allies? The vast peasantry, not all elements of the peasantry. It was the poor peasants and to a point, middle peasants as well, who were very, so here was this, um, these were semi-proletarians. If you have no land and you're working on somebody's analysis, but you are not an industrial worker, you're not working for in a capitalist factory. So Lenin called it semi-proletarian.
There's a
But
question in the chat.
they included this very large segment, and their ambitions were at that point not well defined. They were basically trying to get rid of oppression. So this was basically and gain land, which was a petty bourgeois mindset. But Lenin includes them, and I mean Bolsheviks led by Lenin. And the third element was oppressed nationalities, who were even further backward, who didn't have any education, or they had basically completely feudal control of local mullahs and Christian preachers, and they were highly repressed by the Russian government using Russian. So
That's
he
2 minutes.
combined.
2 minutes,
Yeah,
Raj. Go
okay,
ahead.
I'm finishing. They combine these three elements, and what Lacerda argues, which I'll explain later on in next Sunday, is that if you are not understanding this, you are completely not, you don't understand class struggle. So I really appreciate what you have said today. Those are my comments, and if you can respond as you like. Thank you.
You know, this does have to do with the debate over whether the masses are fundamentally reactionary, which unfortunately is a debate that as needs to still be waged, that I personally have had to involve myself in. And you know, a critical part of why Leon Trotsky did the things he did was because he failed to recognize the revolutionary potential of the peasantry, because he emotionally reacted to his experiences with Russian anti-Jewish bigotry among the Russian peasantry, by concluding that the peasantry is going to remain in a reactionary role terminally, and therefore we need to resort towards the permanent revolution approach of indefinitely expanding our gains rather than building into the masses as they exist within the country where we've already established the revolution. And this relates to, well, of course, it relates to the modern Trotskyist movement because Trotskyism takes its ideas from Trotsky, but it also relates to the way that the KKE thinks and behaves. Because parties like the KKE, they're not genuinely interested in the masses. If they were interested in building into the masses, then they would take their jobs a lot more seriously. And so, yeah, that's a type of problem that has existed within radical politics from the start. This issue of people failing to recognize the revolutionary role that certain classes have, that the peasants had, or that the modern equivalents of the peasants have. And as a consequence, that leads them to erroneous conclusions, whether that conclusion is we need a permanent revolution, indefinite expansion, or whether that conclusion is we need to oppose Maduro while the United States carries out aggressions against Venezuela.
Okay, next is Alex D. If you would unmute, and I want to ask people to raise your hand if you have any questions. Go to the reactions button at the bottom. So, Alex, if you would go ahead and ask your question.
Hi. So, first of all, Rainer, like, good to see you again. But I wanted to ask, so I know throughout your talk, and I agree with you, by the way, but throughout your talk, you referred to the KKE and the Venezuelan communists as Trotskyist. Now, I feel I agree with you with what you're saying here, but for some of the other people here, I want you to explain in what way, like, because like these people, because these parties don't view themselves as Trotskyist, but like, are you saying that like in practice they embody the same elements as Trotskyism in the modern day? Like, in what way, like specifically, do they embody Trotskyism?
Well, they embody Trotskyism by retreating from the masses, by embracing dogmatism rather than innovation in thinking, and it's due to the Trotskyist nature of the way that these Venezuelan wrecker factions think that they've taken this position. Because I actually remember you said a while ago that one of the practices Trotskyists have is to want to debate everything all the time. They're constantly looking for real or perceived problems within a given communist leadership, and they want to bring those problems to the forefront so that they can become the heroes within their own story. And so this has been described as a purity fetish by the folks at Midwestern Marx. And it really relates to that Trotskyist mindset I was just talking about of viewing the masses as necessarily being enemies because you can notice legitimate problems in certain areas and how a lot of people think. Well, guess what? Your only option is to go into the masses. You have no alternative. And you have no alternative but to support Maduro as the U.S. carries out its aggressions. So it kind of is as simple as that, is as simple as the proliferation of a purity fetish mindset, an unserious mindset that leads these individuals and organizations to effectively side with the enemy by rejecting what is actually their options for revolutionary practice.
Okay, so next I'm going to ask Bonnie Weiss, followed by Bill, and everybody who has your hand up, please be patient. We'll get to everybody. So Bonnie, please go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. A friend emailed me. He can't be with us today. Asked me to pose the question: why did the Orinoco Tribune stop publishing Shea's articles? And that's all he said in the message. No details.
I actually think that the appropriate place to ask that question would be the Orinoco Tribune, but Rainer, if you care to
Well,
comment,
I'm
please
just
go.
I'm just
Please
passing
go
along
ahead.
what he asked me to
Yeah.
pose.
No, I can't speak on it.
Okay. All right. Next is Bill. So please, Bill, go ahead. Bill
Okay.
Meyer.
Yes, thank you very much for having these forums. These are great, and I'm so impressed with Rainer being a young man, so intelligent already and so active. I wish I was like that when I was his age. Thank you so much for your thinking. So there's lots of questions. This is one of the most difficult issues to deal with, being in the Communist Party, in and out, and working with groups that support the communists and those who apparently are supposed to be supporting communists but aren't. So I'm curious. I want to have your opinion on Lacerdo and his book, Western Marxism. I'm sure this group here has studied it many times, and how you think that fits in with your concerns. And I'm curious how you feel about the CPUSA and where they stand in relation to all this stuff. And it's a complicated issue, and I guess the yardstick is to find out which groups support Maduro and which don't, so you can pretty much tell who's on our side and who's not. So do you think that's a good yardstick? Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Oh, it is a good yardstick. It's the litmus test for this moment. And like I've detailed, the bulk of the, or a very large part of the existing communist parties have failed that metric. Something I remember Lacerdo writing in that book was, and this book was published in 2018. So Lacerdo had been able to live to see the debates surrounding Libya in 2011 and the reactions from the international Marxist movement. And he pointed out just how many supposed Marxists reacted to that by effectively siding with NATO. And I think the way he phrased it was, these Western Marxists don't really care about the violence that the U.S. empire is waging against these countries. So he said something along those lines. I don't claim to repeat it verbatim, but that's one of the points he made. And so we're seeing this same kind of scenario play out again when it comes to Venezuela and the violence that the empire is subjecting that country to. And the American CPUSA, it honestly, I haven't even been paying much attention to the CPUSA lately, just because it hasn't been relevant in recent times. But just the fact that the CPUSA's leadership makes a habit of endorsing Democratic Party presidential candidates, that's all you really need to know about where it stands in relation to the ruling class and to U.S. imperialism. So I don't know. I haven't looked up CPUSA's position on Venezuela, but it's evident that they have failed to carry out their tasks properly, or else they would be a lot more relevant.
Okay, next we're going to ask Norma to please unmute yourself and ask your question, followed by Polina. So Norma, please go ahead.
She's muted.
Yeah,
You caught me by surprise. I didn't think you were going to call me till the end.
sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, hi. Lovely. Of course, we all enjoyed it, and we all think like that person who said he wishes he had been that way. I wish I had been that way when I was 25, 30, when I've been a recovering, non-knowing communist, atheist, Jew, third generation, and not knowing. What a crime. Anyway, I'm going to bring forward the idea that I told you at the beginning of the meeting, when not everybody was here, that the critiques offered about what's his name, Kit? What's his name? A couple.
Clarenberg.
That people criticizing after his presentation were just saying, oh, you can't do it yet because it's not been written about properly. All kinds of references to this and that, various philosophers who might have been right, but still, the people rising is what counts. And the other thing I have in the chat is if you would have any comments about Stalinism related to what you're talking about. I hold Stalin, you know, in a devoted fan-like manner as the person who accomplished the follow-up to the maintenance of the revolution.
So what I find interesting about the relationship of Stalin to a party like the KKE today is, even though the KKE claims to uphold Stalin, claims to uphold Lenin and these other historic revolutionaries, they have in effect repudiated Stalin by failing, by failing to maintain a rigorous and creative approach towards political practice, because that's the key to being a successful revolutionary. That's why Stalin succeeded. So if you discard that creativity and just keep dogmatically repeating your interpretations of theories as they were written down decades ago without applying Marxism to the conditions of today, then yeah, you're definitely failing to uphold Stalin. Despite,
let me interject, philosophers of thousands of years ago, let alone of the past several hundred years. But go ahead, finish what you're saying.
Yeah, it's this kind of narrow dogmatism that we really need to struggle against.
Okay, next is Polina, followed by Jean. So Polina, please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Rainer. I wanted to bring in the question of Palestine. And what do you think the principled communist position should be vis-a-vis Russia's lack of support for Palestinian liberation? There's a lot of Zionism in the Russian position, and the fact that China, self-proclaimed socialist country, is not principally supporting the resistance and in fact continuing its trade with and commercial ties with Israel. You know, although perhaps some of the positions that are being articulated are good on China, you know, on behalf of China, in material terms, we don't see the the kind of I would say, yes, principled actions that we would want our anti-imperialist allies to have. And you know, I don't think enough communists are you know, somehow being honest about this. You see, it's somehow when we criticize China or Russia because those are our anti-imperialist allies, we are you know, we're somehow making the struggle weaker. But I don't think it should be that way. Your thoughts?
Well, I believe that the principled communist position on Russia as it relates to Palestine is we need to consistently struggle against the capitalist elements within Russia that are at every step of the way trying to sabotage any anti-imperialist action by the Russian state. Anything anti-imperialist, anything revolutionary that the Russian capitalist state does is the result of the influences from the Communist Party of the Russian Federation and the broader Russian working class movement. So when we support Russia's action against fascist Ukraine, that's us supporting the Russian working class in its struggle to influence their government to do the right thing. And as for China, see, the Russian capitalist class, Russia's failings on Palestine are kind of different from what China is doing, in that China is a socialist state. It's a dictatorship of the proletariat, and that has made it take on a different role within world politics than Russia has taken on, and it's taken on a more solidly anti-imperialist position. where the working class within China has not needed to arduously struggle in order to just get the bare minimum done in terms of the anti-imperialist struggle. But as for the trade that China has with Israel, as for China's deciding not to support the Palestinian resistance, see, this is a debate that is going to need to be continued within the global communist movement. But I know the reason behind why China has done this. It's because China views the interventionist policies that the Soviet Union carried out as being not necessarily beneficial. China's priority is to build up its own internal economy, to build up its own civilizational strength. And as part of that, it has declined to take on the kinds of interventionist stances that the Soviet Union would have taken on. And that there's another dimension to this that I was actually wanting to get into earlier, which is when China declines to take on that interventionist posture, it is avoiding some of the errors that the Soviet Union committed in terms of making a lot of other communist parties around the world subordinate to it in a way that was unhealthy. Because what happened as a consequence of so many communist parties around the world becoming flunkies to the Soviet Union, what happened was they uncritically followed the de-Stalinization line that the Khrushchev government carried out, and this weakened their ability to fight against the capitalist reactions and the actions of the imperialists in a lot of ways. So I don't claim to have all the answers, but I know that due to the way that the Cold War went down, China came to the conclusion that it should not take this kind of interventionist policy.
Okay, next is Gene, if you would unmute, and followed by Freddie. So Gene, yeah, you're unmuted. Go ahead.
I believe I am unmuted now. Thanks, Rainer, so much for your talk. Great talk. I really appreciate everything you had to say here. And also, I'm envious of where you live in the heart of redwood country, because redwoods are my favorite other species. They support themselves through the network of root systems and so forth. It's just a wonderful species. And we humans could take a lesson, I think, from the redwoods. But having said that, I want to say, first of all, I agree with what you say about the U.S. bloc being the sole manifestation of imperialism today. And I think that's true. But I would not say that, the communist movement at the present time, particularly China, as you mentioned a little bit, they have a much different view in terms of how they're doing things. And, after the Mao liberation, they went through a whole series of dramatic changes, the Great Cultural Revolution, the Great Leap Forward, and everybody criticized them as being, crazy communists and so forth. But they ended up at a good place, I think, in terms of their position. And so now, first of all, they're the only communist party that holds state power. And they're one of the 5 countries in the UN Security Council, a atomic power, and all this. So I think they're doing some great things, and the way they're using this leadership is through a novel means, not by having bases. They have no bases anywhere except one in Djibouti, I think. But they're doing this by the Belt and Road Project, getting countries to sign on in a win-win kind of situation where they are providing, infrastructure benefits in a way that's much different, so that they help the people. And when they make loans, since half the banks in China are state-owned, they can forgive loans much easier than, say, the IMF and so on. So I think I look at China much more favorably, and what they're doing is a model for communist leadership here. So I'll just throw that out. If you care to comment, I'd like to hear what you have to say. Thank you.
Yes, these benefits that China is bringing to the world by building this model, by making for this example, that kind of shows that China's non-interventionist stance has had a great dimension of positive aspects. I mean, like I said, China came to this conclusion about non-interventionism being the way due to the failures of the Soviet Union and how that led the Soviet Union to fall, and also the other errors of flunkyism and tailism that these other communist parties engage in around the world. And it is partly because of China's deciding to not take on that role that it has been able to carry out the achievements that it has today. And it's because of those achievements that the global struggle is able to benefit in quite a lot of ways. So there's another side to this beyond just that China is failing in these ways, supposedly. And I don't claim China has done everything right, but overall, I believe it has been on the right track, to say the least.
Okay, next
Thank
is
you.
Freddie, if you would unmute, followed by Jim. And I just want to encourage people to raise your hand by click and ask a question, clicking on the reaction button at the bottom of your screen. So Freddie, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I want to make a couple of points here and then ask for your comments. First of all, going back to a bit to the question and comment that Paulina was posing, I want to follow up with that. I don't think people are saying that China should intervene militarily. So let's put that aside. That's not what I'm saying. That's not what a lot of us are saying. They should have stopped trade, and the trade is basically kind of one way. They don't import much from Israel. They export a lot. That should have stopped immediately. Everybody should have stopped that immediately. A genocide happened. It already happened. It's ongoing, but it happened. And we knew that in October of 2023 when the Zionists said they were going to commit a genocide. Okay, so I think we need to kind of stop romanticizing both. For another thing, I need to preface this by saying I am not anti-China. I am not anti-Russia. I don't think they're the enemy. I don't think we should go to war with them. I'm all in with Venezuela. I'm for socialism where it exists. So let's put that aside as well. But I think BRICS, okay, let's see where it goes. I'm glad there's another pole here, economically at least. I do think we need to stop romanticizing the role of China and Russia. Russia has been supporting the Zionist state, okay? That's just a fact. And Zionism is the tip of the imperialist spear. So we really need to think about that. Russia just hosted an Al-Qaeda chief, a head chopper, Tafiri psychopath, okay? What's that about? Talk about China, you're saying that, you said that the problem with the fall of the Soviet Union was because their interventionist actions or whatever. I don't think that's why the Soviet Union collapsed. I think that those interventions, whether it was Afghanistan or wherever, were sound, and that's proletarian internationalism. The China policy sort of critiquing that, I think we have to understand that in the 70s, when the US,
please.
Okay, when the US opened, when China opened to the US, in the 70s, China actually supported the Khmer Rouge. And actually when Vietnam intervened to stop that genocide, they invaded Vietnam, okay? We also have to remember that China also in the 70s was supporting, I believe, UNITA in Angola, as opposed to the MPLA, which was supported by the Cuban intervention for a number of years, and with the help of Russia in terms of military and other aid. And so I think I'm throwing that out there for people to consider. Thank you.
Freddie, so let's give Rainer a chance to go ahead and respond. Rainer, a lot of stuff there. Go ahead and get started.
Yes, I mean, I'm open to the idea that I'm wrong on that point about the Soviet Union not having collapsed because of intervention. But you know, like I said, that's a key part of China's reasoning. So I don't claim to know everything, but that's China's reasoning. And I do believe that it's because of China's restraint and its decision to not get involved in those kinds of commitments. That's an important part of why China has been able to succeed to the extent that it has. So maybe that would have been a better way to phrase my point. It's such a complex issue that it can be hard to articulate. But you know, as for these betrayals by Russia against Palestine, I 100% agree with that. I mean, like I said, there are strong capitalist elements within Russia that are working to set back the anti-imperialist struggle at every step. And you know, there is also an element within China, within the Communist Party of China, that is liberal, and we need to account for this in order to properly understand China. It's not as if the Communist Party of China is a monolith. It's not like all of its members are mandated to state the same positions in every instance. There's 90 million members of the Communist Party of China, and the CPC needed to modify democratic centralism in certain ways in order to remain functional. So within the CPC, you can find certain liberal elements that are more open to cooperation with the United States and, by extension, the Zionist entity. So because of that, I am open to those kinds of critiques as well. And even though China is on the right track, we need to be constantly vigilant about these liberal elements that advocate for cooperation with the imperialists.
Okay, next is Jim. If you would unmute, please, followed by Hobie. So Jim, please go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, thank you. Very refreshing, the energy you bring to the global class war we're in right now. I am very chilled. I served on an aircraft carrier in the Navy around Vietnam time. I was there off the coast of Indonesia when that was overthrown. That moving an aircraft carrier off the coast of Venezuela is a huge move, very different from when they tried to take out Chavez, and the documentary Revolution Will Not Be Televised shows an amazing organizational level of the working class in restoring their revolution. I'm wondering, is the revolution in Venezuela today up to that level? That was extraordinary, and I don't expect it to be repeated, but I'm wondering also, will China, with its billion-dollar investment in a fossil fuel project in Venezuela, take a more active role in trying to back Trump down? And will Venezuela be able to defend itself without support of the rest of Latin America that's prepared to go in on its side? How big do you think this conflict will get?
Oh, that's a big question. But I know that Venezuela has successfully been building up its revolutionary armed forces in this last decade. And that alone kind of proves that Maduro has not been a weak revolutionary leader. He has been continuing to arm the people in anticipation of a scenario like this. And just because of that, because of the existence of the People's Army and the fact that Maduro took this step, if the United States invades, it is going to face a scenario equivalent to the one it faced in Vietnam. It is going to face a popular armed resistance even stronger than the one it faced within Iraq. And that's going to be true regardless of the actions of the comprador regimes in the countries surrounding Venezuela. I can't speak to the extent that China will take action, but we've already been seeing Russia and China successfully create a counterbalance to the United States in the region, just by having their being present to the extent that they have. And we've already seen the United States find itself hesitant in a lot of ways to get as involved in Latin America because of Russia and China. So I can't speak to how far they will go in defending Venezuela, but we know that Venezuela has a lot of strengths on its side.
Okay, next is Hobie, followed by Richard Wright. So Hobie, if you would unmute, please. Go ahead.
Yeah. Hi, Rainer. I apologize for my tardiness. However, I find your insights provocative. Full disclosure, I've been a member of the CPUSA since 1983, longtime labor activist and internationalist, anti-imperialist. I've been sometimes noted as saying the international department of the Communist Party USA is the communist wing of the Communist Party. And I say that with a bit of black humor because, you know, the CPUSA has internally has been through a lot, even in my few decades with it. Your sort of general dismissiveness of CPs is troubling to me because, you know, in the same way that Lenin tells us to get into, you know, the labor movement, warts and all, and struggle there, I would contend now that we have a mass CP here in the USA, that's precisely where we need to be too, as principled Marxist-Leninists. It seems to me too that this critique of the communist parties, I'm not even sure you could say that anymore legitimately because we are mass parties now, mostly. There is no international. And so it seems to me that your critique really gets down to a question of, are we talking unified front or popular front? And many of their critiques that are laid properly laid against the CP now within the United States, I think is because they're attempting to pursue a misguided popular front strategy. We have not taken a strong position on this yet, if we ever will. I'm for unified front. I am highly skeptical of popular front. Could you comment on that?
You say my critiques of CPs. Well, I certainly critique any CPs that have allowed themselves to be taken over effectively by the KKE and tail behind its incorrect positions. I certainly critique any CP that endorses the No Kings movement or endorses the Democratic Party. And I don't want to come across as somebody who just critiques without offering a solution, because I know of lots of organizations, lots of formations that are taking a correct stance. I'm a member of the American Communist Party, which is affiliated with the World Anti-Imperialist Platform. And those are two of the major organizations that I support. And when I engage in these critiques against all these other communist entities, my intent is to rouse the working class out of the stupor that has afflicted it during the post-Soviet era and find a new path amid all of the defeats that it's experienced. And I'm curious I'm curious about your point on the distinction between Popular Front and United Front. United Front, I think you said, and you said that a Popular Front is a mistake, right? Well, why do you feel Popular Front is a mistake?
Well, I mean, maybe I'm exposing my ignorance here, but I'm not aware of any place where the Popular Front actually succeeded ever. Dimitrov, to the contrary. Joe Sims recently proposed the Popular Front for the CPUSA to follow, indicating that the United States was a good example of the Popular Front from the mid-30s through, I guess, after World War II. I would simply say that if that's the best example we've got, Popular Front really seriously sucks. If you recall what happened after the World War II. Well, let's consider through World War II with Browder and liquidationism. My God, So it just doesn't make sense to ally with a so-called progressive capitalist party, because you're going to completely undercut and sabotage the pro-working class leftist elements of necessity. And it just simply doesn't make sense. I don't think historically it ever made sense. The unified front, that in other words, I think does make sense. That's where you strive for unity across left working class formations, such as PSL, Frizzo, other more localized Marxist-Leninist groups. And we've done that here in Dallas reasonably successfully for pro-Palestine work and other things. Maybe that's helped distinguish or make my point here. That's what I would argue within my party, and that's what I do. So,
I think we need to do a program on exactly this topic. I think it would be great. We should try to set something up for that for the beginning of the new year. Great comments. Really, really appreciate them.
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead, Rainer.
Yes. The issue isn't that the CPUSA supports a Popular Front. It's that they support a Popular Front on the basis of an alliance with an imperialist party. That's the essence of what I would say.
Okay, next is Richard Wright. So Richard, if you would unmute yourself, just click on the unmute button, Richard.
Found it.
Okay, go ahead.
Unfortunately, he got Hobie, now he gets me. And I apologize for not being able to see anything. Just Zoom. Okay. Very quick. I had a number of problems with your talk, but I won't get into things like BRICS, and I think you not necessarily you, but I think a lot of people have a misunderstanding of BRICS, Belt and Road Initiative, China supporting Venezuela, blah blah blah. But the real issue that I have is this. First off, my background is I studied economics and in particular Marxist economics way back when, and I've been down in Texas here along with my friend Hobie, doing labor organizing for 40, 50 years now. I don't know how long that is, but and I'm decidedly on the left of the labor movement. And my question to you is this: how do I go to people, working class people, and say, well, God damn it, KKE just doesn't have the right position. They don't even, they're worried about bread and butter issues. They're not worried about, theoretical positions. So very simply, because after all, the topic here is the word 25th, struggle for socialism has changed. how do we, how do we get beyond this, this, what I regard as sort of an intellectual counting the number of angels that can spit on the head of a pin, and get back to, get to organizing for socialism. Well, first off, geez, just organizing, period, let alone socialism, let alone communism. How do we get to that, beyond all this theoretical stuff? Thank you.
Marxists have never won over the masses by talking to them about Marxist theory. They've won over the masses by proving to the masses that our position is something which can bring them towards victory over the capitalist class, something that can win them a better future, and proving throughout the struggle that communists are the ones capable of carrying through this struggle. And so, yeah, we need to demonstrate through our own actions that we need to demonstrate through our own actions that we are capable and willing to carry forth the struggle for the workers and aid the people. And so those are our most important practical steps that we need to carry out. But does that mean we shouldn't struggle against these saboteurs who are trying to cause divisions within the movement? Because there's a reason why I started off my talk by explaining the context of how the KKE and the IMT and the Trotskyists within Venezuela's Communist Party did all of this damage to the Venezuelan communist movement. It's because these kinds of theoretical debates have very consequential implications. They are capable of tearing down what we have built if they go in the wrong direction. And if these kinds of bad faith elements are allowed to prevail, then yeah, they're going to tear down a lot of what we have tried to build. So in the interests of defending what we build in terms of our revolutionary gains, we absolutely need to advance these theoretical debates and prevent forces like the KKE from instigating these splits.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and ask a couple of questions. First of all, I wanted to make a quick comment about the position of the KKE aligned parties. I think people should really look into this, and if they do, they're going to see that the KKE aligned parties and individuals, when the elections last year came up in Venezuela, they immediately started to promote the narrative that the United States put forward, which was that it was an unfair election, that the opposition won the election, and that the election was stolen. And immediately they, with the United States putting its jackboot on the scale of the election, they immediately came out and sided with them objectively. Now they claim, well, we don't support Machado, who just won the Nobel Peace Prize, quote unquote, but objectively they did. Number two, and this is one of the reasons why we invited Rainer to speak, that when the United States positioned now how many aircraft carriers on the coast of Venezuela, they felt compelled to condemn it, just like everybody. Otherwise, they'd be completely exposed. But they always qualify their opposition to U.S. Involvement by criticizing the Maduro government. And in criticizing the Maduro government, they never really bring to the fore the war of sanctions that the United States has waged against Maduro and the difficulties of the position that they have. I think people really need to, a $50 million bounty on Maduro's head. If you're sitting here and you're basically raising the contradictions with Maduro to the primary level, then which side are you on, really? So if you would comment on that, and I have another question too. Well, actually, three people raised their hands, so go ahead. We'll let you go. Go ahead, Brandon, if you want to comment on that.
Yeah, another important point is when we struggle against the KKE's position, we are not talking to just the average worker about this, because of course they wouldn't be able to relate. We're talking to people who have already been involved in the study of this theory, who are already seeking to become part of whatever revolutionary vanguard will emerge. And so within our movement, we definitely need to wage these kinds of struggles, and that's separate from the way that we engage with the masses. And like you've explained as well, this is very consequential. This is necessary for preventing scenarios like the betrayal which we have seen by this faction within the Venezuelan communist movement, and that we've seen from a lot of communist parties around the world at this very critical moment in history.
Yeah, I would just add also that these parties have taken a line that Russia's special military operation in Ukraine is a revanchist, conquering imperialist project, which it all ties together. Okay, next up, I'm going to call on Judith, followed by Alex D. So Judith, please go ahead and unmute and unmute yourself. Judith. Okay, we've got you. We can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. All right. First of all, I mean, I'm not a party activist or anything of that sort. But I have to tell you that I never heard of the KKE until you mentioned it. So I don't know how significant they are, but I don't know. It seems that you're attributing a greater significance to them than they actually have. But at any rate, what I wanted to say was that in order to combat the most likely scenario of the United States invading or otherwise destabilizing the government of Venezuela, we have to understand what their reasons are. And this is what I think is that mainly they have the geopolitical reasons. They don't want Russia and China in the Monroe Doctrine sphere of influence, and they want to chase them out by any means possible. That, and also, I don't think they've given up on using Israel to attack Iran. And if Iran were to close the Straits of Hormuz, that would be a devastating blow. But if they can have access to Venezuela's oil, that would enable them to proceed. I just wonder what you think of that.
So about the KKE's relevance, the KKE has no equivalent organization in the United States. None of the communist parties that the KKE has effectively taken control over exist in the United States. So it's mainly relevant. It's a lot more relevant within Europe. It's nevertheless necessary to combat the KKE due to the just how much downstream influence they hold. But as for the reasoning of the U.S. wanting to invade Venezuela, it's always been the case, and this is something that Parenti emphasized. It's always been the case that the primary reason for why the imperialists invade a given country, it's not so much to, it's actually not so much to seize a certain resource or to make money off of weapons contracts, but the primary reason is to ensure a larger geostrategic control that allows the imperialist superstructure to continue existing. This is the larger picture that a lot of analyses on anti-imperialism miss, and that this is something that Parenti sought to clarify about the the larger context between why the imperialists do what they do. Because imperialism, again, it's not a policy, it's a system. So the primary motive for why the imperialists do what they do is to preserve that superstructure.
Okay, next.
Well, then we're in agreement.
Okay. All right. Next is Alex, and it's actually we're coming near the end of the session. So Alex, go ahead and unmute and ask your question.
Yeah. So one thing I want to say is, I feel like one thing that I think, Rainer, I think the reason why a lot of people are confused as to like the KKE's relevance is, I think, and I definitely think you should expand on this, is the fact that the KKE gets funding from the European Parliament because they have 2 MEPs, and whenever you have a member of the European Parliament, you get foundation money, and they use that money specifically to fund splits within other, not only European communist parties, right, but also within the Communist Party of Canada. Like, they own the properties that the Communist Party of Canada used to own, and they lease it out to them. And in Mexico, they've done the same thing. Even within the US, they currently don't have a foothold here, but with the amount of money they have been trying to get a foothold here. And how they always do it is that they have their festivals, they invite usually youth from other communist parties, and then they try and either pay them or convince them ideologically to split and form something else, or to form a faction, or to try and take over that party. So it's not just a matter of, and keep in mind, the KKE, they're the largest non-ruling communist party in Europe. They have their own trade union. They have like a pretty big presence domestically. They do have a real domestic support within Greece. So I think one thing I wanted to ask is, like, could you expand a little more on like what the KKE is able to do specifically to split like foreign communist parties, and like, yeah.
Well, the best example of that I've researched is their role in agitating against Maduro within Venezuela, and helping thereby prop up the Trotskyist wrecker faction within that country, to the effect that the Communist Party of Venezuela, again, it was greatly diminished due to these divisions that the KKE had helped instigate. And again, it's only in these last few years that the KKE that the Communist Party of Venezuela has been able to start rebuilding. And it seems like you know more about the other splitting activities that the KKE has carried out in other countries. Venezuela has been the main thing that I've researched in terms of this particular phenomenon. But yeah, from what you described, the problem is even bigger than I thought.
Okay, next is Gene, followed by Roger, and we're going to have to wrap it up. So Gene, go ahead, lower your hand.
Okay.
Yeah. Unmute.
Well, thanks. I really appreciate this. I just wanted to say, there are 2 existential problems we face as a species. One is nuclear annihilation. The other is climate change. And China has addressed both of these. One in terms of its nuclear powers enough to retaliate as a deterrent, but it's promised it would never use nuclear weapons against a non-nuclear enemy or initiate a nuclear war. And secondly, in terms of the environment and climate, China, I think, has reforested not only all its areas in terms of solar panels, but reforested for some weird reason, I think, an area comparable to the Amazon. That's probably wrong. But a lot of reforestation in terms of addressing this really important existential problem. Let's just see your comments or reaction to that.
Now, that's the answer to the green capitalist BS that's pushed by our ruling class. It's how we can promote a type of environmental protective policy that is actually in the interests of humanity and the planet. Because environmentalism, as we have typically known it in the capitalist world, that's been a scam by the liberal wing within our capitalist ruling class. and it's China that practices a kind of ecological civilization where it's carrying out these climate projects which are actually beneficial and that truly serve the interests of the masses. And I think that that's how we can answer the eco-fascism that is increasingly going to be promoted by our ruling class. And this is kind of a tangent, but our ruling class has been undergoing a very strong rightward shift where the wokest liberal posturing has been sidelined more recently. And so it's going to be, I mean, even though the right has generally minimized the climate reality, it's going to need to address the climate. And the way it's going to address the climate is by embracing eco-fascism. That's the prediction I'm making. The only coherent answer to eco-fascism is China's ecological civilization.
Okay, next is Raj, and then we're going to wrap it up. So Raj, please go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on an important question that Paulina asked and you answered. You know, at the geopolitical level, we all wish there was a kind of like we wish God was there, that China and Russia can take care of this horrible destruction of lives and property that is happening to Gaza residents who are effectively today like the Jews in 1930s and early 40s in Eastern Europe and Germany. But if you recall, Soviet Union, mighty Soviet Union with mighty army, was unable to block that at that point. And Russia is already engaged in essentially a life and death struggle in Ukraine. It's really so. I don't think I agree with you that it is their capitalist class. Putin has expressed his sympathy, but there's a limitation of power on Russia's part. It couldn't even defend its own in Syria. So the question of balance of force, Marxists have to think it is our responsibility to make life harder for the ruling class here, which supports policies that Israel follows. So that's my comment. Please react to that. Thank you.
China has already been fighting key parts of the fight for us, but just by making U.S. capital weaker. And something that I think is really brilliant that China did was they took advantage of the greed of our capitalist ruling class by getting them to export their productive forces into China, and thereby getting able to be a lot richer, build up their economy a lot more, and lift up more of the global south in turn. So, like I've said, China is overall on the right track, and I think the revolutionary forces on a macro scale continue to get stronger as time goes on. The question is, how well are we going to be able to wage the remaining parts of the struggle against the U.S. empire, and how many more lives need to be lost? How many more people are going to be murdered by the U.S. empire in order for the world to be compelled to win this fight?
Okay, so with that, I just wanted to thank Rainer for his presentation. This was a very stimulating, high-level discussion that we've had. I want to thank him. I want to thank the participants. Great questions, great discussion. You can check out Rainer's Substack at Rainer Shea, on Substack. If you search him on Google, I think it also comes up. Rainer, you have some really provocative and insightful posts on rural America. And at this point, we'd like to have you come back and talk a little bit about your experiences organizing in Humboldt County and your thoughts about the struggle in rural America, something that we don't cover enough of here as a urban center on the West Coast. Come back next week. everybody should come to participate in a discussion on Domenico Lacerdo's book, The Class Struggle. It's really part 2 of this discussion today. I think it's going to be great. Raj Sahai is going to present a summary and some initial ideas, a review of the book. This is really a group discussion. You guys come, express your opinions. We're going to, through the discussion, we want to clarify what's going on and what is to be done. And with that, we want people to go to our website, icssmarks.org, sign up for our email notification list, make a donation, send us a contact. And I also want to make a comment that who said that boomers only want to get back to brunch? Some boomers want to make a revolution. They want to see it within our lifetime. So I especially want to thank all the folks that came in and raised provocative questions. This is really one of the best forums for discussion of Marxist-Leninist revolutionary ideas on the internet. So thank you very much. And with that, we'll stop the recording. And thank you for participating.